Good morning. Hopefully this mic is working. Buongiorno. Thank you, buongiorno. Thank you guys so much for being here on a Saturday morning. We are about to start our conversation with the Honorable Jennifer Elrod from the Fifth Circuit on Star Wars at the Federalist Society National Convention. So we may have reached new heights of nerd, but I am so excited to be here and so honored to be hosting this. So I believe they're going to get a slideshow for us started in a bit.
Oh, I think here it is if you want to.
Oh, perfect. There we go. And do I just press?
I think you just press the button, or the green button maybe.
Okay. Great.
Do they have the slides?
Not yet. That's okay.
Okay.
So before we jump into that slideshow, for those in the audience who are unfortunately uncultured and not familiar with Star Wars, Judge Elrod, if you would like to describe for us what this franchise means to you.
What doesn't it mean to me? You know, don't you just hear the music and see the screen and it gets you so excited when the next movie comes out? People have grown up with this. You know, my little brother built a Millennium Falcon in his room. He's a decade younger than me. We all have different memories. We may remember, like I did, back when the first movies came out in the theaters. You may not. Some of you may be really for some of the apocryphal stuff from the Star Wars franchise. Some of you may be watching all the Clone Wars stuff. You know, there's so many different generations of this, but we can all share in this epic saga. It's a dark versus light, and light does win. It's the wonderful myth that perhaps comes from somewhere inside of us. For those people who are people of faith, that believes that, you know, self-sacrifice for the good that saves the world, that story. We love to hear these myths and these stories that speak out to something inside of us.
That's amazing. Well, we all know that you're a phenomenal jurist, but I would love to establish your credentials in a galaxy far, far away. So if we can get the slideshow going, and if maybe
I see one.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, that's from my chambers. I'm kind of a nerd. Someone just knitted me that Gandalf, so I know we're not doing Lord of the Rings, but I love Lord of the Rings too. I have my official lightsaber. I have a giant R2-D2 in my home. My husband over here has tried to get me to give it away or throw it away, but it's still in our home. So does anyone need a giant R2-D2? I'm not quite ready to give it away, though. We did a show with Judge Eskridge and my in-of-court group, which includes my friend Jim Cooper, a lawyer, an insurance lawyer, who's the most fun person I know. Who knew that? Jim Cooper and Charles Eskridge and several of us, we put together this show. We filmed part of it at Mission Control. It was for the 50th anniversary of the Space Treaty. And we played Star Trek and Star Wars characters. And we sang songs from Les Mis. And there's R2-D2 and me having a moment. So, as you might imagine. And there's my husband with me at the Star Lost thing. Long-suffering 37-year-old husband, 37-year marriage husband, Hal.
I think
is that it?
I think these are
I think that's it. Well, those are just some things in my life, and it's fun to have to have fantasy and stories in your life, especially when your day job deals with really serious problems that people have. It's good to be able to have some break and be able to deal with that. So,
yeah. Absolutely.
How did you get involved in it?
Oh, like all young daughters, I was forced to watch it by my father. But eventually, went through a series of boyfriends who also made me watch it and grew to love it. And just this past Halloween, I dressed up my doodle dog as an Ewok, so that was quite adorable.
Wow. Well, did you dress up as anyone? Were you Padme?
Not Star Wars themed, unfortunately. But
Star
next
Wars,
year
but
we're
your
working
dog.
on
You're
it.
working on a joint thing. Our show that we did on Star Laws was rather innovative in that we had Alexander Harrison Geisler, who was one of my law clerks and a fabulous lawyer at Treasury and such, and her husband, I think, is high up in the government now. She was Darth Vader. I don't know if that's a national security concern that she appeared as Darth Vader, but she was Darth Vader in our show. And I think she may have dressed up Halloween this year as Darth Vader as well.
That's incredible. Well, I'll turn it over to more of a serious conversation. You just wrapped up a panel on AI and the law, and in 2020 you published an article called Trial by Siri, AI Comes to the Courtroom. So I'm curious, do you believe that Star Wars accurately predicted the capabilities of modern artificial intelligence models?
Well, I don't know that Star Wars played a unique role in that. Of course, Star Wars is about the imagination, and there's so much, but people have been doing predictive things in literature and fantasy for years. You know, the great Arthur C. Clarke predicted this, you know, the different satellites in his writing. You know, we were just talking about what happens when the AI becomes sentient. It has a self-preservation thing. You know, we all know that from Open the Pod Bay Door. You know, I can't. You know, so there have been so many things that have been from people's imaginations that have made their way into modern technology, and it's exciting. You know, I still would like to. I mean, I would like to be able to teleport. Like you can in Star Trek. I think that would help me get, and we wouldn't have to worry about this airlines and all the canceled flights if we could just teleport around. Or maybe we could be just like on the Jetsons cartoons where we go, why aren't we flying around?
That's a great question.
You know? Anyway, go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, the clone army is one example in the Star Wars universe that blurs the line between human and machine agency. If you were drafting AI regulations for the Galactic Republic, would you favor a hands-off, innovation-driven model or a more rights-based framework for recognizing droid autonomy?
That's a fascinating question. You know, this was my confirmation hearing. I think I might have to pass on answering that because the question might come before me. But I think rights-based is always a good place to start. Not just regulation-based, but always rights-based is a good place to start with any argument or discussion. But it's a fascinating thing, you know, and although Star Wars, unfortunately, treated the droids terribly, you know, just absolutely terribly. They are, you know, what we would call enslaved beings or devices, and that's a terrible thing. You know, Star Trek grappled with whether or not Data had rights as and whether he was a sentient being, and grappled with all of that, and whether that gave him rights as for self. Dignity and preservation and that sort of thing. So these are fascinating, deep questions. And do you think about them a lot?
I do. I recently watched the prequels, which I know is, you know, I was prepping for this panel, and I know there's probably some disagreement in the room of whether that was the best place to restart, but...
Well, it's chronological, so I think that's decent if someone of your generation. But you know they're just not as good.
They're not, and I have to say, thank you. You can clap for that.
Everybody knows that while I enjoy watching Return of the Jedi the most because it's such a happy ending, The Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars movie.
Some are saying that the franchise actually regressed in the 70s and 80s when they were making the original episodes. They hand-painted all of the Star Wars ships, and that's what they used to model them. And the prequel CGI definitely fell short of that. So maybe
you got to put the effort in.
On that. Well, you've previously spoken about new developments in space law, and you mentioned earlier you even filmed your CLE programming at NASA headquarters. So with the rise of private space companies and the subsequent inevitable torts that are committed outside of Earth's atmosphere, what lessons can Star Wars teach us about extraterrestrial jurisdiction?
Wow. you know, you do need to come together and talk about these things. You know, we have laws. Did you know that we have laws about space debris?
I did, yes.
You knew this. Good.
It's
Do they teach that in law school these days?
Unfortunately, no.
No. Okay.
They did.
Okay.
That's why I come to FedSoc conferences.
Because you learn about this. We have law about about debris, about if you collide with somebody's the satellite paths and things. There are all kinds of agreements and things, and they're very important. And I think that Star Wars can teach you some, and Star Wars can certainly teach you not to have secret meetings with Palpatine as you're trying to design your plans. So you got to just figure out who the Palpatine is in the room.
Would you consider Palpatine's coordination with the Galactic Senate ex parte communications?
Well, I think some of it was probably, but he did have. He was not really a party before the Jedi Council, and he had some role to advise the Galactic Senate. So there would be a role for some sort of advisor thing within the. So I'm not sure it would all be ex parte communications. But to the extent Palpatine exercised covert influence over the council to undermine the institution, that clearly led to the fall of the Republic and would be very concerning if something similar happened in our country or world today. Mm-hmm. So
well, I think
I would be against it.
That is a great transition to Star Wars and ethics. I know that you've done a lot of impressive work with judicial ethics, including serving as chair of the Codes of Conduct Committee and testifying to a U.S. House subcommittee on judicial ethics. Do you think
fun?
Do you think the Jedi Code would pass our model rules of professional conduct?
Well, I don't know about that because our Jedi Code appears to be more kind of like a meditative mantra. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. I don't know that gives you a lot of practical guidance about how you're supposed to behave in certain situations. So I would say that the judicial codes of conduct provides a little more meat on the bones for how you should behave. The Jedis do have in common with the judges that they try to make sure that they don't have too many outside influences or entanglements. And I think that could be analogized to the idea that we're not supposed to hold stock or be involved with the parties to the case, that we're not supposed to be entangled. I think we could roughly analogize that to some of the basic parts of the judicial codes. But it's really, a mantra of peace and meditation is a little different than some rules of professional responsibility. Just saying.
That's fair. So as a judge, the Jedi claim to serve the Republic, but they also follow their own higher code. How do you balance the fidelity to law with your moral conscience or natural law principles that some judges might follow?
Well, that's a very serious question. It's a question that people have grappled with for, since time began. I am a person of deep personal faith. I'm a Christian, I guess you would call an evangelical Christian by personal religious faith. And I'm a Baptist by denomination. And so my faith is very important to me and is the bedrock of my life and comes first. But at the same time, I have taken an oath to God that I would apply the rule of law faithfully. And so that being faithful to the rule of law is consistent with my faith. Now, should it ever be not consistent in a particular case where I thought that there was a big conflict, I would likely, if it was a one-off, I would have to recuse. If it were going to be a persistent thing, I might have a, St. Thomas More moment or something. Hopefully we won't have that in the United States in the near future. But that, if you can't do a particular case because of your faith, you should not do the case. But I actually think it's very consistent to do a case because of your faith, because you have taken an oath to God that you would follow the law. And so it doesn't usually come up, and that's a good thing.
That's amazing. I love that. Speaking of rule of law, do you see those principles better embodied in the Jedi Council or the Galactic Senate?
Oh, gosh. I would say, I'm trying to think. I would like to talk a little bit about the Constitution of the Galactic Republic.
Let's get into it. I love it.
Would that be okay? I think Martin versus Hunter's lessee would have to be covered early in the course. The early republic had a government that had legal supremacy, at least on paper, over the states. However, there was some confusion as to how the supremacy clause operated in practice. Hunter's lessee involved a ruling by the Virginia Supreme Court that conflicted with the federal treaty. Remember that federal treaties are federal law. In short, the Supreme Court found that it had appellate jurisdiction over the Virginia Supreme Court's decision, but this case would be pertinent to this class because it involves federalism, a tricky topic for the Galactic Republic with a weak supreme sovereign, technically over a bunch of inferior sovereigns. But it's all very interesting, and you see how this all played out in a duplicitous world of intrigue. Hopefully we don't have that. I'll leave that to some others and some other branches to deal with that.
That's fair. So you're talking about whether or not Star Wars can sort of blend into our own worlds. Have you ever, for better or worse, seen a lawyer in your courtroom who reminded you of a Star Wars character?
Well, fortunately, Darth Maul doesn't usually come into court wielding his dual lightsabers, but I think the marshals would have to handle him if he did. But, it's hard to know because, back when I was a trial judge, you would see people over a period of time, and you could kind of tell if they had sneaky sensibilities. But if you just see someone for 40 minutes, it's hard to tell if Emperor Palpatine is actually before you. It's just not, it's not something you can get a clear read on in that amount of time. I guess we might have some wise lawyers that we say from time to time, help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope. Please clear up this very confusing case to me. But I have to say, certainly no lawyers wielding a lightsaber in court, and that's a good thing. But I would say that I haven't had an actual lawyer. Yoda has not come. I would like Yoda to come. I think that would be fun.
That would be fun. But do you think his riddles would violate the plain language statutory canon?
That's probably true. That's probably true, but it would still be fun,
It would be fun.
I think if I were a character, of course we would like to be Yoda. I think it would be fun to be Yoda. He's so wise and he's so brilliant. And I like it that he says, judge me by my size, do you? And that's not just because I'm 4'11". But unfortunately for me, I cannot lift Luke's Starcraft with my hand like this. I can't even control the Fifth Circuit with a whole team of people to help me run it. So anyway.
So if you were a Star Wars character, would you describe yourself as Yoda? And more importantly, who would your law clerk say that you are?
Well, I wish I could be Yoda. I don't think anyone would say I'm that wise or profound, and my opinions are usually kind of straight down the middle, kind of marching through. They don't have a lot of riddle nuance to them. My law clerks, I did ask them this question. We sent them a note and asked them to weigh in, and I don't know if I'm happy with where they ended up, but they think that I may be Padme, in the times, because they said I have to do diplomacy, and I can still fight if I need to, but I have a lot of diplomacy in my day-to-day life now, and I came to my job in a young age. I haven't been killed off, I haven't died in childbirth. A lot of things haven't happened. So the analogy kind of breaks down at that point, but I do hope that the next generation of people that come after me will be really important to help save the universe. So that's a good thing, and I can only hope that. I have to say, I'm so proud. I have this week had 2 of my former law clerks confirmed to positions this week. One of them, Jordan Pratt, is here in the room, and that reminds me of people coming after me who's doing well. Welcome, Judge Pratt. And one of them is Deputy Secretary of State, Caleb Orr, who I don't believe is with us here today, but it is the neatest thing. And also my former law clerk, April Ferris, Justice Ferris, spoke on a panel about the Texas business courts this week. And it is a great joy to see one's progeny, and so to speak, in law clerks and the people that have passed through and you could mentor, to have their time and to get to see that. And I mean, I actually think that's it's an important thing for judges and all people to keep in mind that, when Leia calls out, and we already mentioned it, she says, help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope. I think it's important for judges not to think of themselves as the only hope, because I think when judges start thinking of themselves that they're the only ones who can step in and right a wrong, that there's a lack of humility there, and it could cause you to exercise outside your role. And it's really important that we stay in our lane. I know we like some things about muscular judging, but we must stay in our lane. We cannot just willy-nilly go and say, oh, I have to save the day and think I'm the only one, because we're not the only ones. There are others. There are other branches. There are other people coming after us, and it's a very dangerous proposition to believe that you're the only one who can save the day. So I would encourage us to check that impulse before we do things in our spheres.
That's fabulous advice for a young Padawan, and I really appreciate that. That's awesome. And is there a particular scene in Star Wars that stands out to you that really represents its hero's journey?
Well, we were already talking about the greatest movie, Empire Strikes Back. We all know this part, where Darth Vader and Skywalker engage in the lightsaber duel. Darth Vader first tries to convince Luke to release your anger, and it is only your hatred that can destroy me. So often there is a temptation to achieve our ends through emotional, impulsive actions. After we've been provoked, we need to obviously resist that impulse, even though it's human to want to respond in kind. When people say these most vicious things to each other these days, and you have got to take the high road. You will be so much better for it, even though every fiber of your being may wish to strike out in kind. We just can't do that. I'm reminded of, just the events of recent times, with Erica Kirk saying, to the person who murdered her husband, I forgive you. That's not the impulse that, that was not done from her first impulse. That was done from a deep place of richness and faith. And not for I'm going to lash out against those. And so that's the first and probably most important lesson that you can learn from Darth Vader's encounter with Luke. Second, I would say that when Darth Vader tells Luke that it's useless to resist, that's not true either. It will feel like it's impossible to resist the temptation. It's just, everything is against you. And in the moment, it may seem like that. So you might as well just give up. And it's important to have friends around you. And Luke certainly did have friends. In fact, he sometimes made impulsive choices regarding his friends. But the idea that we have people to tell us it's not futile, we don't have to do, it's not useless to resist, and we can carry on. We need people around us to buck us up from that. And so I would say those were some important lessons from, who knew that we would talk about a lightsaber duel and talk about important lessons of life, but that's what we do.
No, it really speaks to the fantasticness of the franchise. I'm thinking a lot about Yoda's quote, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and how that speech applies to modern discourse. So really appreciate you bringing that to light and discussing, your approach to that in your chambers as well. Well, we don't have too much time, so this has been such a fantastic conversation, and I'll end it with one light question, and then we'll release you all to our amazing breakout panels we have scheduled for today. If you could set up your judicial chambers on any planet in the Star Wars universe, where would it be?
Well, it would not be Hoth. We've already established that. Somebody asked me that. I don't like cold weather at all. I mean, it's pretty obviously Naboo. I do like the Star Trek universe better. They have a better planet choice in this world in that regard. But, and in fact, I'm surprised we're not talking about Star Trek, given that the new Lego set with the Next Gen is out. And I was just talking to Mike about that on the prior panel. We're both pre-ordering, I think, although I'm not endorsing any products. I'm just telling you that I personally enjoy things like that. And since this is about the frontier, and we know that space is the final frontier from that fantasy, but nonetheless, that's where we end up. So,
are you a big fan of the Star Wars Legos?
I like the Star Wars Legos very much, and I'm excited to have Star Trek Legos, and Lord of the Rings. We just need lots of fantasy literature Legos in our life, don't you think?
That's great.
Anyway, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much to Judge Elrod for being here with us today. A quick announcement, the next slate of programming is set to begin at 11:15 a.m.
Oh, Caroline, I have something for you.
Oh, my goodness.
I have my Star Wars avatar that Peter Redpath made for us, and I would like to present you with one if you would be so kind to take
I am absolutely
wielding a
honored.
lightsaber.
Is the camera on this? Can we zoom in on this? This is incredible. Oh, thank you.
So congratulations to you, my Padawan.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here.